If you sometimes feel like homemaking is repetitive and like something you can't stay on top of, there is some solidarity here. It is a meaningful, sometimes very beautiful and inspiring job, but it also can be hard. Back when I was in high school, I ran cross country for precisely one season before realizing just how tough it was. The cross country kids wore shirts that said, "Running is real and it's relatively simple, but it ain't easy." And I think a lot of parallels can be drawn with homemaking. There's a lot of it that's pretty straightforward, but there can be a lot of plates spinning at one time, and that can be a challenge. In thinking about this topic, I was thinking through all of the things that homemaking actually is. So it's not just laundry and dishes and some of those mundane everyday tasks that we think of, but it also is household management, which can entail inventory, organization, you have operations manager. So what events do you have coming up? What do you need for them? Whether that's a potluck at church, birthday party, school events. There's maintenance. So what do you need to DIY? What supplies do you need to keep things up? Preventative maintenance. Do you need to call someone, hire someone to fix something? Cleaning also could fall into this category. There is a financial management aspect, functionality, layout, home atmosphere, beauty design, lighting, childcare, basic nourishment, protein, whole grains. It can be a lot to manage, and sometimes, especially when you're brand new and this is a learned skill, it can be challenging. We're going to talk about all that and the meaning of homemaking. This should just show you how much value is in a homemaker whenever you have to consider all of those things that you have responsibility for. But I do want to tell you about what I'm making here this morning. I freshly milled some einkorn flour last night in my grain mill and then fed that with a bit of my sourdough starter to make the einkorn and water mixture all into sourdough. Now, normally I don't feed my sourdough starter with einkorn flour. I like to just keep it with an all-purpose flour. I use that in anything, but whenever I want to make something like einkorn sourdough pancakes, the night before, I just take and make a large portion of einkorn sourdough starter, which means I just mix up some einkorn flour, some water, a little bit of starter, and by morning it's all bubbly and active. And I just used my regular sourdough pancake recipe, which is over on farmhouseonboone.com. It's a simple one. It just requires adding a few things like eggs, oil, honey, salt, baking soda to sourdough starter, whatever kind that may be, whether you have some rye starter, whole grain, all purpose, it doesn't matter. You can switch it up however you want. I also added in some chocolate chips just to make it a little bit more delicious. And now I'm moving on to some redecorating here in the bedroom. So part of homemaking is handling the function of the home. And one of the functions that's been, I want to say lacking, but has become very important here in the last month or so is making our room work better for a baby, because we have had a baby in our room forever. In past seasons, like when we lived in a different house and also whenever our room was in a different part of this house, I would usually put the baby in the bathroom, which I know is kind of weird, but I could fit the pack and play in there, and then the baby had a separate room. Well, now we have a baby in our room, but I've done this canopy crib thing, which I shared all about in a different video. But we have a few challenges in this room. One is for sleep training, which we are getting ready to start doing with Victor. The whole sleeping in our bed thing isn't working out as well as it used to. So it needs to be darker in here. So I'm bringing in new curtains that have blackout liners. But then also Luke and I have a bit of a small wardrobe and it doesn't close, which is a big problem. So I just found on Facebook Marketplace this big, beautiful cathedral door wardrobe. It's very similar to the one we have at the foot of the stairs where I keep quilts and blankets. So when I saw it, I knew I had to have it because I knew the style would work with our room. The scale would be better as well. This is a very tall room. I know that's really hard to grasp on camera, the scale of things, but the other armoire, wardrobe, whatever you want to call it, it never did really have the right scale. It worked out, fine enough, but it wasn't perfect. So I'm reorganizing and making this room just function better for us. Taking a quick break from my homemaking to tell you about something that we have been loving here in our home, and that is Dreamland Baby. So I told you about the gently weighted Dreamland Baby sleep sack that we were using for Theodore back in the fall. We are still using that every single night. I love the added security. It seems so cozy and comforting to wrap a baby in a sleep sack at night, but the gently weighted ones are extra comforting because the sack features Dreamland Baby's exclusive Cover Calm technology, which is evenly distributed weight from baby's shoulders to toes, which naturally reduces stress and gives the baby the feeling of security and comfort, just like a hug. This helps your baby to feel calm, fall asleep faster, and stay asleep longer. In the last month or so, I have been trying out the sleep sack for Victor. Now, any of you who've been following along with my podcast and my channel for a long time may know that I don't always have the best sleepers, and I know that that's partially just user error because of the way I co-sleep with them for so long. There's always this transition period where things can get a bit dicey, and I need all the help that I can get. I have my dark room, I have my curtains so that he can't see us. I'm trying currently to transition him to his crib. The other night in the middle of the night, he wasn't settling. He's no longer co-sleeping that great. I had him in his sack here, and Luke said, just put him in his crib. I said, great, if I do that, he'll just scream. He actually slept for 4 hours. I was so shocked. So of course now I really love this, and I'm really happy to have it as we do make the transition from co-sleeping to his crib, which is going to be best for all of us. This is the Dream Weighted Transition Swaddle. It's made for babies who are ready to transition out of the swaddle and designed to reduce wake-ups and to help transition your baby safely to arms out sleep. The transition sleep sack features 3/4 length gently weighted sleeves that fit snugly to help reduce the startle reflex. You can try out Dreamland Baby by using my link in the description box below and using the code BOON to get 20% off site-wide. Again, thank you so much to Dreamland Baby for sponsoring today's video. Now, one of the aspects I mentioned of homemaking is dealing with functionality and constantly revisiting how things are functioning in your home, keeping an eye for things that would make that function better. So, for example, we have a sock bin. It's a saga. You've heard about it, but we try to keep all of our kids' socks in one bin, which in some ways works really great. In some ways doesn't, but it is what is working currently for us in our mudroom. And the bin broke. It was a wooden bin. It was cracked down the back, which meant every time I put socks in it, socks fell back out. And so it is important for me to keep lists of things that I am looking for so that whenever I'm at an antique shop, a thrift shop, on Facebook Marketplace, I have that functionality issue front of mind. I can consult my note and keep an eye out specifically for the things I need. I was able to find and replace that box so that now I have that part functioning better. There are just so many things around a house, even whenever you get it right up front, that over time wear out, break, a situation in your house might change so that something isn't working like it used to. And it's a constant thing that we as homemakers have to be aware of to readdress. Another thing that is constant when you have children, I have 8 of them, is their wardrobe. So at the beginning of every fall and every spring, pretty much, that's kind of how I tend to do it, I swap out warm clothes for cold clothes and warm clothes. So twice a year I do this massive swap out. I go through everything. I make lists. I make sure that everybody has what they need for the season ahead. But sometime over that 6 months, it has to be readdressed again. Either something gets a hole in it, A child will grow out of something that fit them 6 months before, but they've gone through a growth spurt. We've inherited clothes. So many things change. And so it's just a constant thing to go through, declutter, make new lists of things that I need to stay on top of so that everybody has the proper clothes they need. We are really feeling that right now because it is almost to that 6-month point where I redo. We're starting to notice that kids need a few things here and there to make it through. I'm doing some reorganizing here in this room. I pulled the basket off of the old armoire, which I had up there to give it some height, so it no longer needs to be up there because this one is so much taller, which means I now have a basket that I can reclaim. It looks pretty in here, and I already have a basket overflowing with baby wraps, so this will serve as another spot to keep those. I'm going through both little boys' clothes. Victor has 0 to 3 stuff still in his bin. He is now 7, almost 8 months at the time this is coming out. So I have to go through that and make sure that now only 6 to 9 is in there, and it's a constant thing. Another thing that needs attention in my home is the photos. So all the photos currently have 7 children. We have 8, and we've had 8 for over half a year now. So this wall is another thing calling for my attention. One way that I try to keep everything straight in my home is by having clearly laid out priorities and then lists of small things I can do to keep up with some of these nagging things that seem like they're never ending. So the priorities right up front are healthy food, so having a healthy meal on the table, basic cleanliness, laundry, and homeschool. I'm sure I'm leaving a few out, but those are the first things that come to mind. Andrea. Yeah. It's Theodore. This guy, look, there's Theodore. There's Theodore 1 and Theodore 2. Daddy's holding Theodore. Of course, childcare is in there as well. So once those things are met, there is not a whole lot of time, a whole lot of margin for anything else. That's why I have to stay really organized with lots of lists in my phone so that whenever those opportunities arise, I can use them to take care of some of the other things in my home. So I have a note in my phone every single day of a few things I want to accomplish in those margin points of the day. And I would challenge you to look for those because it sometimes can feel like there just isn't any time like that. But whenever you really look at your day, there are just some moments throughout every day, at least there is for me, where I can fit in a few extra things if I am organized enough to have the tools and supplies I need for them and have clearly laid out what I want to do so that I'm not wasting any time thinking about that. Some things just hang out in the back burner, and that has to be something that we become okay with. So for example, mentioning that armoire in Luke and my room and how it didn't really have enough space, it didn't really close. It has been like that for years. And in my note where I keep a list, I literally have a list that says things I am shopping for. It said armoire for our room, and it lived there on that note for years. And that's totally okay. But I did have that in my mind so that, I'm not actively looking every day, just waiting to check that off the list. But when one came up, I knew that I should go get it so I could check that off. And we do have to be content with some things just not being perfect and figuring out, okay, is it time to work on this thing right now? Or are there other pressing priorities that our attention should be turned toward, such as food? Now, earlier here, you did just see me making oat milk. I never make oat milk. We are a dairy family, raw dairy, 100%. However, we were all out of milk. Our milk pickup wasn't until tomorrow, and I really wanted to make a latte. And I was like, oh, what milky substance do I have? And then it occurred to me that I have oats, so that served the purpose. One thing I can't overemphasize whenever homemaking is hard is to simplify your inventory. I know I talk about this a lot, but it just can be repeated because it is what has made the biggest difference in me feeling like things are manageable. I was listening to Cass from Clutterbug talk about how when we are first homemakers, we hear about how you need to clean all the time, you need to do laundry all the time, but nobody ever teaches you that managing your inventory and constantly staying on top of that is a regular part of homemaking. So we go about and things come in, and we don't really even know how this happens, whether it's something we purchase at some point because we think this will make our lives better, or someone gives it to us, or we find it at a thrift shop for a really cheap price. No matter how it happens, when you really think about it, you could even take a log, get out a notebook or a note in your phone, and just write down the things that come in your home for a week, whether it's a pair of socks or some papers from church or something you ordered on Amazon that you thought would really be great for this or that. And look at how many items that is. And now multiply that times 52 weeks. And just remember that if this isn't something you have a habit of doing, you're constantly thinking about, okay, do we need this? Is this something I want to clean around, dust, put away whenever the 2-year-old gets it out of its spot, manage, whatever, and not getting rid of things on a regular basis? Whatever number you came up with, that's how many things are coming in every single year. If you've been a homemaker for 10 years and it isn't in your regular habit to go through and look at things with a critical eye, then take that number, multiply it by 10, and you will see why everything feels so hard. I've had to do this. I've had to really look at spaces that even now I'm like, wait, why is this in here? Why am I shuffling these things around? Or why when I open this door, is it stressful? And that really helps me to just stay on top of everything, to remember that things come in the house, whether we feel like we're big shoppers or not, because I don't feel like I am, but still, nonetheless, it's a constant thing. For dinner tonight, I am making a basic meal. I make a roast regularly, pretty much every week. I will take a roast tonight. It's a moose roast, so sometimes it's beef. Brown it over high heat on both sides, give it some color, salt, pepper, add a little bit of wine or broth, whichever. Let it cook slow, either in the oven or the Instant Pot. Today it's the oven. And then I'm baking twice baked potatoes because I had some leftover baked potatoes in the refrigerator. So I'm doing some feta cheese, I believe today, a little cheddar, some Greek yogurt, onions, green onions, salt, pepper, putting that back in and baking it. We keep meals pretty basic around here most of the time. Thaw out some meat, add veggies or potato or bread or rice. So usually it's meat, some kind of carb, some kind of veggie or two. There's more in the summer, but I try to keep it pretty simple so I don't have to think about it too much, so that I do have some margin for some of those other things that just really do feel constant. But just know that when homemaking is hard, it just can be. And there are some times where it feels really easy, like I'm moving through it, checking things off the list, and sometimes where I just can't figure out how to get ahead of it. That's all normal, but it doesn't mean to give up. I had someone on my podcast recently, and she was saying that she struggled in the beginning days of her homemaking with feeling like, what's the point? And she got to this place of apathy where she couldn't really see why there was any value in what she was doing. And then it just made it worse and worse. Things went downhill. She wasn't able to stay on top of anything because she couldn't really figure out why even bother. And I don't want you to get to that place. And that is why I have my podcast and this channel. There is value in homemaking. It is a lot. It's more than just dishes and laundry and cleaning. It can be inspiring and beautiful and creative. I get to be a chef and a designer, sometimes an artisan baker. But there are days when none of that happens, and that's okay too. All right, well, I hope that you enjoyed following me as I did some homemaking, redecorated a bit in our bedroom, moved some things around, redid some photos, and made simple meals. If you are brand new to my channel, I make content like this every single week, and I would love if you would follow along and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for stopping by our farmhouse.